My name is Jim Sherray. I'm with the Huntington District Water Management Team. I'm here today to talk about a water control manual change that we are proposing at Summersville. It's not something I expect people to be excited about. Hold on a second, let me figure out how to work this. We are by law, by policy required when we change the water control plan to seek public involvement. And so that's what we're doing here today. I'll present that plan, talk you through what we're going to do. And then given that it's not really a big controversial change, we were just going to turn this into a listening session. We know that for the master plan, there was a lot of talk about Summersville itself, but the master plan itself does not address the water control plan. So we were just going to open it up to see if anyone wanted to talk about the water control plan. So I'm going to do a quick project introduction, talk about the proposed change, talk about our environmental assessment, and then we can jump on to comments and questions and anything else we'd like to talk about. I want to thank everyone for coming. I've been to public meetings where there's been nobody, so we're doing great here, so this is good. So everyone probably knows where we are. So we're sitting up in Summersville. The lake is basically the red triangle on the screen. Summersville is one of 3 lakes in the Kanawha Basin, which we're operating to control for the Kanawha River and the Ohio River. We've got Bluestone and Sutton also as sister projects. Bluestone's pretty big in the news right now because it just caught a significant amount of flow from Hurricane Helene. So we're pretty high there. But we're still in a drought through this area, so it makes things rather a little bipolar right now in the state. So it makes things interesting. Let's see, keep on going here. So Summersville Lake has a number of different purposes that we operate for. The primary purpose is flood control. Our goal is to reduce the flooding that occurs downstream through the Gauley River, through Belva, Gauley Bridge, through the Kanawha Basin, the Kanawha River itself down from Montgomery down to Charleston, down to Point Pleasant. And then we also get benefits from Summersville along the Ohio River. But in addition to that primary purpose, we operate Summersville for a multitude of other reasons. We're looking at recreation both on the lake and in the tailwaters. We're operating for enhanced rec, which is basically whitewater downstream of the project. We've got a requirement to do 20 days of whitewater a year for out of Summersville. We're operating for fish and wildlife, both in the lake and downstream. We do low flow augmentation, which very specifically is minimum flow. That's the flow required to keep the fish and the other biologics downstream of the lake alive. But then in addition, we have a project purpose for water quality to provide flows down actually through Charleston. So when the dam was built, we had a lot of pollution down through the Kanawha River. And so one of the solution at the time was more flow. So basically dilution is a solution. And so Summersville was designed to dilute the Kanawha Basin. Thankfully, Clean Water Act happened. We've cleaned up a lot, and we've actually been able to significantly reduce our augmentation. So won't really address that unless we want to, but that's an additional purpose. And then currently we've got an ancillary activity of hydropower. So we're actually generating clean hydropower out of Summersville. Or I shouldn't say we are supporting the city in a now. Did I get it right? Or am I too old?
LS Power.
Alice Power, sorry about that.
And then he doesn't even work for LS Power. He works for another company's contract with LS Power.
So, on the right side of the screen is a quick summary of the chapters that we have in our water control manual. The water control manual is the Corps' contract with the public on how we're going to operate the project. So we're going to describe which downstream control points we're going to operate to. We're going to describe summer and winter pools, rate of releases, that type of thing. We're going to describe whitewater. So the water control, inside the water control manual is the water control plan, and that's what we're proposing to change. So let's see. To expand on our project purposes, our goal when we operate the project is to minimize downstream stages greater than control. So reduce flooding. We're going to operate to maintain minimum outflow. We've got an endangered candy darter downstream, and so we're operating to provide flows that will keep the candy darter and all of its everyone else living in that habitat alive. We provide 72% of the deficit at Charleston below 2250 CFS. And a CFS, I think everyone here probably knows what a CFS is, but it's basically a bowling ball, or a beach ball. So one CFS is a beach ball, so 2,250 of those going by every second. We're maintaining our seasonal pools. We have a winter and a summer recreation pool. And then we're providing 20 days of whitewater a year. On the right side is actually the Corps' public-facing website. On that website, we actually have all of these lake elevations. We identify spillway elevations. We identify impact locations, and then the little pop-out box on the bottom those are the locations we're controlling for. These are the locations which we've identified. If we can maintain those below those stages or reduce the flooding above those stages, we're able to provide the most impact for the communities downstream. So we're actually going to talk about, we're going to do a illustration of how we operate for flood control. This brand new slide we had a student work on this year. So we'll blame it on him if it doesn't work out right. So I should start with the big gray thing in the middle. That's the dam. This dam actually has a hydropower unit right downstream of it. We've got a little house down on the right, and then there's an orange arrow drawing to a staff gauge, which we're highlighting on the right also. So the rain moves in. It's multicolored rain because we want to make it interesting. And so when the rain moves in, we're actually going to see increases in flow into the dam, also see increases in flow downstream. And so as long as those increases downstream don't cause us to go above control, and so the control that I'm using here is Kanawha Falls, and so we control for 22 feet there. As long as the flows stay within bank, we will continue to release water out of our project. However, when those flows increase enough that that we're concerned about flooding downstream, we're going to reduce the outflow out of the project and store the water in the lake. Think of it like a big bathtub. So we're going to hold that water until the downstream stages decrease. Local flows run out, and so we're going to increase our outflow out of the dam so that we can evacuate the storage out of the project. That, in its essence, is flood control. As far as utilizing dams, and then after we evacuate all the water, we'll return the downstream to its normal levels, and we'll move on. Anybody have any questions about that? All right. So the last background that I wanted to share is a deviation, and this is specific to the proposed change that we've got going on. So when we have an action that we need to do, or some other entity asks us to do with regards to operating the project, and that action is not covered in the water control plan, then that action is a deviation from the water control plan. And we have to go through a specific set of investigations and approvals to do that. And so we've identified a number of different actions which we do on a regular basis. So we do periodic inspections. We're doing project maintenance, pulse releases for environmental studies. We do fast water rescue training at a number of different locations. We do get temporary requests for pool changes, and then we get rescues and recoveries, say if a car goes into the river downstream at Belleville. All of these things fall outside of the water control plan. And so for us to implement these, we would, after getting the request or recognizing we need to do it, we would detail exactly what it was. We would go do an environmental assessment to make sure that this action is not going to impact other project purposes or the environment. And then after we got a positive response from that, we would seek approval from our division office, from the general down in Cincinnati. And so that actually is what we are targeting our Change Act. So we are looking at these actions, these deviations that occur on a regular basis. And we're basically recognizing we have an inefficiency where we have to go to our division office. Sometimes it takes a week to get approval to do these things. And so we are recognizing that given that they occur on a regular basis and they do not have significant impact to the environment, we're gonna basically take that approval authority and shift it from the general at division to the commander at the district, at Huntington. We're going to do that with the stipulation that we're going to continue to follow the same process. We're going to go in and we're going to do NEPA. We're going to evaluate to make sure there are no impacts. But the approval of that NEPA in itself is going to be the approval of the action, and we're not going to need to do a deviation because this action is now going to be part of the water control plan. And that's the whole change that we're proposing. We did do an environmental assessment on this particular proposal. Basically, it only changes who approves it. We're not changing the process that we're going to undertake. We're not impacting the environment in any way. Nobody, if we didn't tell you about it, you would never notice that we had made this change. And so basically the environmental assessment basically found that there is a finding of no impact to this action. So I'm here because I have to tell you about it because we need to include you as part of this process. I don't expect anyone to get excited about it. And that's my entire presentation as far as the proposed action. We're definitely, if anyone has any questions about that, I'd love to talk about it. If you have any questions about anything else water management related, I and my team would love, we are open to any conversations about any of our water management operations. That's all I've got to present. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions over here, Randall? All right. You better not.
Okay. So I do have a couple questions. I'd just like some clarifications of what you were saying. So your example was like if a car went in the river, okay? Are you saying that the way it is right now that the general in Cincinnati has to approve any changes so you can get the car out of the river?
So for a car, it's actually an emergency process. So we have the authority to do it, but then we have to go back through and get the general to sign off on the fact that we did it. Okay. So there's a bureaucratic inefficiency going on there. Whereas we recognize that it's an emergency, we're going to go and undertake that action, but then we have to go back through the process. We have to evaluate if there were any impacts, and then we have to go and get a buy-off on, basically a note, yes, I see that you've done this from the general.
Okay.
So.
And then, of course, we're fortunate everybody in this room knows that we have this current study underway. And so I want to ask something more specific to this change in the water control manual, okay? And I didn't bring any of my notes and stuff because I had a pile of this, like, you know. But, so I find it interesting because you're going into the water control manual and addressing one piece to make a change without a review of the water control manual. Is that correct?
We're definitely reviewing one very specific piece of the water control plan, yes.
Okay. So obviously you're aware of what we're doing, and of course we're being told that at the end of the day, if there are going to be changes, it requires a total review of the water control manual. Is that correct, or have I misunderstood that?
So the tricky part is that the changes that we're studying are very significant. So they will impact multiple project purposes. Is it okay if we talk about what the changes are?
Sure.
All right. So the changes that we're talking about studying, or we are studying, is allowing winter pool to fluctuate and allow the hydropower plant to release floodwaters below a certain level, an undefined level which is being studied. So whether it's 25 feet above winter, 35, it's an undefined level at this point. And so that change there's an impact to the flood storage by making that change. And whether it be, it's temporary impact, but there is an impact there. And so when you start looking at that impact, you're not only impacting flood storage, but then you have some potential impacts to recreation. And so you've got to start looking at the entire impact of that change to the other project purposes. This particular one, there was no impact to other project purposes. It made it very simple. As far as the changes that we're studying, there's going to be so many different areas that we need to verify this is not an issue, that you end up changing. If the change enacts, it's a pretty significant change in the water control plan. So that's what I would key in on is that because it impacts other project purposes, you have to verify, you have to be able to identify how much that impact is, and then if that gets approved, we've got to document every single aspect of that in the water control plan or in the water control manual.
Okay. So I noticed at the end you said that this change, if you could bring up your last slide, we're talking about NEPA, that it appropriate levels of NEPA would still be completed.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess what I would ask is, because you referenced NEPA, even in the public notice of this meeting, NEPA was referenced.
Right.
So as where we're at now, to go forward, we have to do a NEPA study.
Yes.
Okay.
For the study we're talking about. Yeah. I
Okay.
gotcha.
So what you've done here is just applied this to NEPA.
We actually, do you want to address this, Jackie?
Yeah, so we actually went through NEPA for this change, and then we're also the stipulation of a finding of no significant impact was that every time we do a deviation, we also go through NEPA.
Okay.
So if there's a car and we deviate, which is no longer considered a deviation if we go through, but if we change how we're operating the water to get the car out, we would go through NEPA to do that.
Okay.
And I mean, for the car situation, since it's an emergency action, we would do NEPA after the fact.
So you do it then, okay.
But for most other actions, we would do NEPA prior to the action. And that's how we got to a finding of no significant impact for this whole change to the water control manual.
Right. So one of the concerns that was brought up when we proposed making this change was that we would use this as a way to eliminate or to allow impacts to the environment. We would, because a periodic inspection is the prime example, because periodic inspection, we've got to lower our flows below our minimum flow with potential impacts downstream. And those impacts are dependent on the current conditions, the current hydrologic conditions. If we're in a drought, it's more likely. If it's wet, it's less likely. So there was concern if we put periodic inspections as part of the water control plan, we wouldn't have to do any more environmental evaluation for that action. And so there was concern in the district that we were cutting off an appropriate process. So we, as part of this proposal, we're saying we're still going to do NEPA. Now, to carry that on to your proposal, that's really going to be a NEPA one time. We're going to sit back and say, all right, here's the proposal. We're going to significantly change the storage use in the project, and so we're going to study it through. We're going to study it through all the different project purposes, through the culture impacts, through the human environmental impacts and environment, and then come up to a finding. And if that finding was there's no significant impacts, well, then we would expect to see implementation of that.
Okay.
And then that would be it. You wouldn't have to do NEPA on that again, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
So as next steps with the final report, which I'm sure you saw, our final report, the NEPA study, there has to be a completed NEPA study.
Yes,
Okay, which is got a price tag to it.
yes.
So if you could, I know this isn't what that meeting's about.
No, I expected this.
Yeah. So can you explain that to me? What's different applying what we're doing to NEPA than applying this to NEPA?
It's just a level of effort. So
Again, because it's so massive and has effect on so much that.
yeah. So if you just sit back and you need me here,
No,
right?
no.
That doesn't matter.
No.
All right. So if you look at let's just talk about REC. So for NEPA to evaluate the impacts to REC, you're gonna have to document with this change. You're gonna see the current recreation areas and the current launch ramps flooded at a certain amount, and so we're gonna want to identify every single location where we're expecting a REC impact and figure out, all right, how significant is that? Is mitigation going to be applied to that? And so there's a lot more effort into public outreach and ensuring we have a good handle on what's exactly going to happen. For flood control, you're looking at basically evaluating, we're gonna see benefits to clean hydro, but we're gonna have, how much of a change are we gonna see to the annualized reduction in flood benefit? Is there gonna be a change? How much of that change is gonna be? And so there's just a lot more effort in teasing out each one of those facts. So that's why you end up with NEPA being a much more significant effort. I think that the proposal for the NEPA evaluation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that includes, it's not actually, we're going to do an EIS for that, because we expect it to be that significant. And so an EIS is a much more significant process than a REC, or, so we consider this a REC, right? Or was
This was an EA.
This was an EA.
But deviations are recs.
Okay, so this was an EA, the next step above an EA is an EIS. And once you start doing EIS, it's just, you're putting a lot more effort into making sure you understand all of the different, all of the impacts that possibly could occur. And so it's just, that's why the effort's a lot bigger.
To kind of give you like a frame of reference, like an EA is typically like 30 pages long. An EIS can be like hundreds of pages long because you're talking about significant impacts, and then usually you have to mitigate them or at least talk about why you can be okay with significant impacts.
Yeah. So the final report, and I was telling Toby and Brandy outside, we're headed, right now the date is we're going the 23rd to DC to meet with Secretary Connor. And the other thing too, the final report came out with numbers that we never asked for, like the deviation in the winter pool. And so it's my hope that some of those costs, we don't need a study to raise the winter pool to 1650. We've never asked for that, and when the final numbers come in, those were the numbers were in there. What we're asking for is a minimal number. And so my hope is that the impact of that $1.1 million to continue to go forward to study as a part of trying to get some results out of what we've already paid for. There's a lot of stuff in there that we didn't put on the table. And when they looked at the numbers, which I want to say publicly, I can't say enough about the experience we've had working with this process because it's been top notch. Chris Stoltz out of Tennessee has just been super guy to work with, and all of them. I can't think of what her name is. The gal that did the initial stuff with this.
Is it Megan?
Megan.
No, I don't know Megan's last name.
Yeah. I can't. I'm horrible with names. But so we're hoping that when we go, that we can, we don't know what our appetite is for any more money, any more study. And then again, some of the things that are in there, we kind of feel like are things that we would be doing to help the government on things they need to do and or should do themselves, not us do and pay for because. So we're going to try to see how. It is what it is, but I was this NEPA stuff. I was just curious about the difference between it here and us.
Yeah. Some of the modeling. So there's things there that you didn't ask for. They looked at, but it wasn't any more effort to go ahead and include that. I remember some discussion about that when we were in the middle of.
So you're just basically talking about looking at the different pool levels.
Correct.
So I believe we went from
To 16,
16 to
20.
16 to 1650 basically.
Yeah.
And so every 10 feet, I think they ran a different iteration. And that, my understanding, that wasn't a very significant effort. They basically, they had to set up the model and then you change one parameter in the ResSim model, and then you just start rerunning it. You change it again, and you start running it. So I don't know that the additional levels.
Again, I'm a layman at this. Trust me, I am a layman. I've learned so much, probably more than I need to learn. But it seems to me like if you're going to hold winter pool level at 1650, the wear and tear on the dam and the spillway and stuff like that's going to be different than if you're asking for something 1620 or less.
It
seems like there would be some more cost and expense in the big picture if you're looking at a 30-foot level difference.
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that the purpose of the study was to sit back and say, to look at what's the possibilities here what are the benefits? Is there actually a hydropower benefit to operating differently, and then identifying the benefits at different levels? So I think that was the main purpose.
Okay.
But if you guys sit back and say, we don't want to look at these high events, we just want to look down at the lower, and I wouldn't say holding the pool as much as allowing hydro to release from a specific level. So we'll still be drawing down, but it'll just be at a slower rate as hydro would do it. But yeah, this process is brand new to the Corps. I think you guys are the first ones going through it. And so it will be interesting to see what the Secretary's marching orders are for the next step. And it'll be, we'll find out from Chris what it is. But so it's definitely a very interesting process.
Meredith Ledart.
There you go. Yeah.
Let me remembered Meredith in there.
Yeah, yes. We said Megan, it's Meredith.
Yes.
Yeah. Meredith Ledard, yeah.
That's all we got.
That's all I got. Randall, you don't have anything?
I bet you covered it all.
Just trying to remember who you work for, aren't you?
Yep.
So, well, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
And if there's anything we can do for you, you obviously know how to get a hold of us through Brandon.
Absolutely.
So Jeff is actually our team lead for the basin south of the river.
Okay.
And so Jeff is spinning himself up on everything down here. He's currently running the whole Bluestone mess.
So how much are you up there? I mean, what's,
You wanna brief it?
just out of curiosity?
How much? How high did the pool get?
Yeah.
Close to 1494.
So it was 65% of our flood control pool.
Wow.
So it's the third highest pool record up there.
About 84 feet above.
Wow. 84 foot above? That's what
I think you computed we had an average of 6 inches over the entire basin.
Yeah, I think so.
So in the headwaters up in Boone, we had 15 inches. But as you move down toward the dam, thankfully, it was a lot less, but we averaged 6 inches over that entire basin to get to that pool. So,
Any discussion in the water management team of the dams south of here, and around Greenville and in
Oh.
on the performance or any of that?
I've not heard anything from that. I read somewhere that there was some concern of a TVA dam potentially failing, but they squashed that down quick. And
Are you talking like storm dams?
Yeah.
For this storm? I did ask. I was on the phone with them and I did ask, and they actually said that there were really no issues with any of their projects, but there were a lot of issues with other private projects or, they did have some dam breakage, but it wasn't anything that the Corps was running.
yeah, TVA seemed to also weather it too. So in areas, they had 30 inches of rain.
Yeah, crazy.
So just that, like, I was listening to someone talk about it, and they're like, yeah, in the the southeast corner of Kentucky, they normally get 50 inches a year, and we're looking just a little bit outside that boundary that there was 30 inches of rain in 3 days. So I think our deputy chief, he was calculating that the storm was a 1,400-year event. So it's scary to think how close it came
Would
to.
you say the rainfall inches were what?
So it was 30 inches at the worst case, it was 30 inches of rain over 3 days.
And we're just thinking about some of the design levels of some of the dams we've got.
They're not.
They're like
Yeah,
23 inches, let's come to mind.
So some of them are, so you're looking somewhere for most of them it's like 15 to 20. Bluestone is really, it's really low. Like, obviously we handled 6 inches, but we're not much higher than that.
The heavy rain was pretty widespread. The syndrome was huge. I'm surprised they haven't asked us to. But that's what we're talking about.
Oh,
I think that's probably
you think? It's definitely a possibility. It's,
a lot of water.
You put some pretty heavy storms over this project in the study, didn't you?
so that is one of the things we looked at the peer to record for the study. So we haven't gone to the theoretical. So by putting a storm over top of it, that's where you start going theoretical.
We've had a lot of talk about that, so.
Like some of the next steps would include that though, right?
Yeah.
Do all of
And,
that.
and so from the flood damage reduction portion, what we've got to do, so we've identified the 30-year period of record, and obviously they want to expand that to the period record of the dam. But it's those so what you want to do is get a life cycle annual damage. So you want to sit back and say, if this dam was functioning for 20,000 years, how much would protection would provide downstream? And then you go, okay, we're going to tweak this, we're going to change this rule and do it again. And then you can actually sit back and say, here's your life safety, here's your change in life safety. It's 0.01 lives per year, or your annualized damage changes from just let's say increases by 10,000 or 100,000. That's the type of thing that you start moving storms like this over top of Summersville. You can start putting frequencies to that and see what the change is. That's one of the next steps.
And I just want to back up. When I asked, they said that there was no issue with core stuff, but I don't know that it was actually dams, but they said there was some private stuff that had issues, and
Yeah,
whatever it was, didn't hold up well.
30 inches of rain, or if you just like you look up at Richwood, I'm not sure what the name of that. When 2016 happened, they were worried about
What's the lake?
the dam right above Richwood. It's the
Summit.
DNR,
Summit.
the Summit, yeah. And so there's a lot of smaller structures, whether they be state structures or private structures, or an old pump, or a structure for an old mill that I could see really like 30 inches of rain is ungodly.